Record. All right, we're recording. And I'm going to share my screen. There we go. Sweet. All right, so my name's Kirsten. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I've been working with adventure programs for almost 5 years now. So that's pretty cool. I'd like to start off by acknowledging that we are fortunate to be able to study and work on the unceded, traditional, and ancestral territory of the Chumash people. Much of the knowledge that I share in these workshops comes from traditional ecological knowledge, preserved and passed down through thousands of years by Indigenous peoples. I hope that this presentation can do justice to that tradition of sharing knowledge about how to live off and protect the land, while also acknowledging that the past and present original inhabitants of this land have been irrevocably harmed. I realize that these are just words, but I hope that these words can create awareness and be a step towards future change. This is my 8th workshop this quarter, so thank you so much for coming. It's quite been a few. Today's is on storm safety and risk management. And the purpose of this workshop is basically to learn how to avoid being stuck in a storm, what to do if you are stuck in a storm, and how to keep yourself safe while in storms. We're mostly going to talk about lightning and rainstorms, but if we have time, I also have some stuff prepared about snowstorms. Please feel free to type any questions, comments, or concerns into the chat, or if I invite you to turn your mic on, you're welcome to do that as well. I don't know if you want to share, Jerry, but what do you want to take away from today's workshop? Or do you have any questions before we start?
Well, I basically came here with an open mind. I'm willing to learn everything or anything. Um, yeah, well, I don't know what else to say.
Good. Thank you. All right. So why is it important for people like you to learn about storm safety? It's actually probably a lot of good reasons to take a class like this. First and foremost, I think nature connection is pretty important. I'm a huge proponent of connecting people with nature. Um, One of the best first steps towards nature connection is feeling safe when you're outside. And if you're worried about storms constantly, you'll have a hard time connecting with nature. So that's a good reason to take this class. Um, Secondly, we want everyone to have fun and enjoy the outdoors. We like success stories. When a friend comes back from a backpacking trip or when your sister goes out camping, you wanted to come back talking about how she danced in the rain, not how she almost got hypothermia, right? um, Thirdly, leave no trace. I'm actually a leave no trace trainer, and one of our first principles is be prepared. You can't be prepared if you don't know how to keep yourself safe in a storm. Finally, I think informing others is another good reason to learn about storm safety. I hope that after you take this workshop, you'll be able to share this knowledge with your friends and family so that they can also be safe and have fun in the backcountry. We're going to start off with some general guidelines that apply to risk management in most storm situations, and then I will follow that up with some specific storm situations. REI has some really good advice for people going out into the backcountry. It's impossible to know for certain what the weather will do, even on day hikes. Accordingly, a little common sense and cautious attitude are two of the most important items you can bring with you into the backcountry. Our first bullet, hope for the best and prepare for the worst. You want to carry reliable gear and assume that you're going to end up in a storm, even if nothing happens, just so that you're fully prepared before you go out there. You also kind of probably want to investigate the region's historical weather patterns before you go there. Talk to rangers, call ranger stations, ask locals, consult guidebooks, look online, whatever you need to do. You kind of want to know what could happen. And then also you're going to want to stay informed during your trip. Remember that weather can change more quickly in the mountains and storms often roll in the afternoon. So it pays to look at the forecast, not just what you're seeing in the sky. You could carry a small radio with you as well, so that you can tune into regional forecasts that are like current and not just what you heard before you got on the trip. Next, you're going to want to keep an eye to the sky. The best way to stay safe in a storm is to not get caught in one in the first place. If it suddenly gets dark, if the wind begins to pick up, or if you can smell rain in the air, you should seek safety. I kind of think that knowing the different kinds of clouds and what they mean can be a real lifesaver, because you can see clouds in the distance and you're like, oh, that's a rain cloud. Oh, that's a lightning storm coming in my way. So we got two kind of different kinds of fronts that can come through, warm and cold fronts. Warm fronts are defined as warm air masses that gradually push out and replace cooler bodies of air. Warm fronts, which move at roughly half the speed of cold fronts, rarely produce violent weather, but the precipitation they generate may linger for long periods. Warm fronts progress from thin, high level cirrus clouds to low, dense stratus clouds. Altostratus, the first picture we have, are kind of dense, smoky looking mid level clouds, and nimbostratus, gray, thick, low level clouds, usually carry precipitation, anything from a drizzle to a steady rain or snow. Low hanging monochromatic stratus clouds carry moisture and often resemble ocean fog. Then we got cold fronts. These involve cold air masses that wedge under warmer air pockets. Cold fronts can develop rapidly and move swiftly, causing temperatures to drop, wind directions to shift, and barometric pressure to fall. Cumulus clouds on the left are white, puffy, fair weather clouds. Should these puffs continue to build upward throughout the day, rain may come later that day. Cumulonimbus clouds on the right rise vertically and expand dramatically from their original white puffy bases to soar high into the upper atmosphere. On some occasions, their tops will flatten out into a menacing anvil-like shape. These classic thunderhead clouds foretell potentially severe weather. Cumulonimbus clouds also form independent of cold fronts, blossoming in the afternoon hours of very warm days and producing late afternoon thunderstorms in the mountains. All right, so you've already prepared ahead of time. You've been keeping an eye on the sky, but now maybe you've noticed the clouds are coming in and maybe a storm's coming. You want to head for shelter. Being on a trail, in a field, or on a lake is not necessarily safe during a storm. So the first thing you should do, even if the storm doesn't seem bad yet, is seek cover. Being in a car is safer than being outside, but you should always keep the windows rolled up, refrain from using electronics, and resist leaning against the doors. The type of shelter you seek will also depend largely on the type of storm you're trying to avoid. So we're going to get into that a little more in depth on specific storms, starting with rainstorms. Although I'm assuming, Joe, you're in California. Yeah. Yeah. So although California is pretty dry in general, the backcountry, especially at higher altitudes, actually gets rain pretty regularly, often on a weekly, if not daily basis. So rainstorms are pretty common when you're out camping, backpacking, whatever you're doing out in the woods. Here's some things to think about before your trip when considering whether to stay at home or go out. Excuse me. Is there flood potential? Is it raining so much that there's a chance for flooding? This is actually very, very important in some areas where you're going to have to be crossing waterways, be it on a bridge or on foot. And also when you're in places that are usually dry. And so if it does start pouring rain, you can get flash floods, especially in like narrow canyons, deserts, areas that are like kind of seasonal waterways. So in the summer, they're not going to have water, but in the winter they will, or vice versa. Yeah, you're going to want to consider that there could be flooding issues. You also want to consider lightning potential. Violent storms sweep mountainous regions without warning. Be sure to fully understand climate trends in mountainous areas. The last thing you want to do is get caught above the tree line during a thunderstorm. We'll get into that in a bit. Finally, kind of like want to consider how miserable are you going to be if it starts raining and doesn't stop raining while you're out there. If you're on a really long trip and it's supposed to rain for 8 days straight, you're probably not going to have a lot of fun. If it's going to rain for one day, you might actually have a lot more fun going than staying home, excuse me. You also want to pack appropriately. This is kind of like a little packing list, obviously, of just things that are relevant to rain. But number one on your list, a pretty lightweight, breathable, waterproof jacket is going to be really helpful for you out there. We usually recommend going a size up so that you can layer under it in case it gets cold. Um, the thing with rain jackets, if it's pouring for hours and hours on end, they're not necessarily going to be that waterproof. Like they can leak. And if it's not breathable, you're going to sweat inside of it. So you'll get wet on the inside. So make sure you get a breathable one. If you got armpit zips in it, that's super important. You can unzip those if you get warm and still stay dry on top. Also, we recommend bringing underlayers that are not cotton. You're going to want synthetic base layers to wick away sweat and that can dry quickly if you do get sun after the rain. I personally never recommend rain pants, but some people really like them. You really only want to use them when it's raining like terribly, like just constant pouring rain. Otherwise, they just get really sweaty and gross, and they really don't help you in the end. Gaiters, I personally don't use, but some people use them to keep their shoes kind of from filling with water. It's up to you if you're into that. Uh, you might be better off having waterproof boots or just having boots that'll dry easily or shoes that'll dry easily when you get back into the sun. You probably want to waterproof your gear or buy pre-waterproof gear. That being said, waterproofing doesn't last forever, so you do have to renew that or take care of it properly. Like some people recommend like ironing raincoats, and there's also like soaps you can wash various kinds of gear with. What else? You're gonna want to bring a dry bag, at least one, for your very important items that need to stay dry. This includes down sleeping bags, down jackets, electronics, whatever else just can't simply can't get wet. If your down gets wet, it's not going to be useful. All right. You might also want to throw some extra socks in that dry bag because having dry feet is very, very important. And you're going to want to wear those at night so your feet can dry out. Finally, many people have a waterproof backpack or a cover for their backpack or an insert into their backpack to keep things dry. Moving on, you've already been caught in the rain, unfortunately. You did everything you could, you packed appropriately, you planned ahead, you checked the weather forecast, you still got caught in the rain. This is because sometimes rain can strike when the forecast calls for sunshine and rainbows. If you find yourself hiking in the rain during a downpour, try to seek some shelter for a minute and take a break if possible. Look for an overhanging boulder, sheltered tree, or simply take out your tent fly and make a fort. Wait for the worst of the rain to go away and then hit the trail again when the storm has calmed down. If you're not going to stop, like for a break, at least stop to put your rain cover on your pack and your rain jacket on so that you can stay a little bit drier while you're hiking. Mandatory. You got to keep your feet dry. You know, if they get wet during the day, you got to dry them out at night. Wet feet can really cause or worsen blisters, and it's really hard to hike when your feet are in a lot of pain. So yeah, bring those extra socks and don't try to power through the foot troubles. Listen to your feet, stop and change socks, or administer any first aid that needs to be done. I recommend personally boots or shoes that aren't waterproof so that they can dry out faster once you are in the sun. Some people prefer waterproof boots if it's not going to be raining too much because they won't get wet at all. But if it's raining a lot, water gets inside your boots. Unfortunately, if your whole trip it's going to be wet, rainy, cloudy, and not sunny, there's not much you can do. But for the most part, the sun's going to come out and you'll be able to just kind of lay out your clothing, lay out your socks to dry. Just, during lunch, while you're eating breakfast, maybe attach it to your pack so that it can dry where you're walking. We definitely recommend doing that though, if you have the opportunity and the sun's out. What else? So You decided to keep hiking through the rain or you stopped for a bit. Now what? You gotta set up camp. Night's coming. How do you set up a tent when it's raining outside without getting wet? You're probably gonna get wet no matter what, but the best thing you can do is just do quickly, move quickly, all right? Um, when looking for a campsite during the rain, you're gonna wanna avoid low lying areas, especially in the desert. Sandy washes might be inviting, but these drainages turn into violent rivers quickly, even with a light rain. That's specifically in deserts, but pretty much anywhere that there's a dry, sandy, or rocky area, that's probably a wash when it's raining. You're also going to want to keep your camp at least 200 feet from water, not just for leave no trace, but also to avoid flooding. And if your trail's above tree line, you're going to want to find a campsite that's lower in a more sheltered area. Especially if you can find trees, you're going to want to be in that kind of area so that you're less of a target for lightning. Your next thing you're looking for, you don't want to be so you don't want to be above the tree line and you don't want to be in a wash, right? Which is super low, like bottom of a valley. You don't want to do that because either way, you're going to have issues. Finally, once your tent is set up, you're going to want to make sure that all your vents are open unless there's like super gnarly wind so that you can avoid condensation buildup, which is kind of gross at night. Yeah, and just make sure that once you find that spot, set it up quickly and get inside so you're avoiding getting too wet. All right, now we're moving on. Often, rainstorms are accompanied by lightning. So let's get into that. Lightning can be very beautiful, but like many natural phenomena, it can pose a danger to human life. Lightning storms can happen with or without rain. In California, summer lightning storms are one of the main natural causes of forest fires. Unfortunately, hikers are at a greater risk of lightning exposure than your average person, since nearly all lightning related deaths obviously occur outdoors. Each year, about 300 people are struck by lightning, but only about 80 people per year die from lightning since 1959. I believe that number shrunk in the last 10 years to like 50, but still a lot of people are dying from lightning strikes. So, we're going to teach you how to hopefully not die in a lightning strike. This is kind of a graphic I found. I don't know if it makes any sense, but basically, lightning leaders from thunderclouds electrify ground based objects as they approach the Earth. Ground based objects then may launch lightning streamers to meet these leaders. So you've got lightning coming down from the sky and electrical charge coming up from the Earth. And like basically when they meet, that creates the like shockwave sound that we hear that's thunder. But yeah, you can actually like hear the streamers coming up from the ground. Apparently, it sounds like bacon frying, and you can like notice your hair standing on end when that happens. Um, yeah, so when those two meet, makes the bright light that we see and the big booming sound of thunder, which is pretty cool. There are some misconceptions about lightning. Lightning does strike many times in one spot, if especially if it's like metal, like the Empire State Building. Um, yeah, so that's a myth. Caves are not necessarily the safest spaces in thunderstorms. Very shallow caves or like like an old mine shaft that has like metal in it, that can be super deadly, super dangerous. So don't do that. Bad idea. Also, blue skies do not mean you're safe. If you hear thunder, you're potentially in danger, regardless of the lack of clouds, because if you can hear it, that means it must be close enough to hear. All right, here we go. Here's a couple good ways to prepare for lightning storms. Just like we said earlier, you're going to want to check the weather forecast. You can actually, you're going to want to also, if you can, have access to the NOAA weather radio so you can be currently informed of local storms. This, if you've got a phone, you could bring a radio, stuff like that. Not necessarily super important if you check the forecast if you're on a short trip. You're also going to want to be mindful of any storms in your area or conditions that are right for the development of thunderstorms. This image shows what an approaching thunderstorm looks like. The towering clouds with well-defined edges are a good sign of lightning approaching from afar. We saw this earlier when I was showing you clouds, the like anvil shape. Um, if a storm is approaching, you're going to want to get down as quickly as you can from ridges, peaks, and elevated areas. In mountainous areas, like I said, thunderstorms typically develop in the early afternoon. So you're going to want to hike early in the day and be down the mountain by noon. You might have heard this from, like, I don't know, some middle school class teacher, like how to tell the distance lightning is from you. But basically, you're going to want to time the interval between the flash of lightning and the sound of thunder. Thunder travels approximately a mile every 5 seconds. And so if it takes 10 seconds for the sound to reach you after a flash, the storm is 2 miles away. If that interval is shorter, the next time the storm is getting closer. So if it's 10 seconds the first time, then 8 seconds, then 6 seconds, it's getting closer to you. Does that make sense? um, Things to avoid when you are in a lightning storm. You don't want to avoid water, avoid metal objects. If you have any metal, metal in the frame of your pack or like hiking poles with you, you're gonna want to make sure they're at least 100 feet away from you. Also, you're gonna want to avoid high ground, solitary trees, and close contact with others. If you're in a group, you do not want to be huddled together during a lightning storm because lightning can strike near you or one of you and kind of like bounce basically out from that, and you could all be knocked out by lightning and have nobody to help you get through it. So don't do that. I think I've seen a lot of different recommendations for how far apart you're supposed to be, from 25 to 100 feet. So I guess be as far away as you can. But yeah, I think try to be away from your group. Also, you don't want to be in contact with dissimilar objects. So don't be on the shore between water and land. Don't be on a boat when like your boat's up against the land. I don't know. I didn't really understand that, but that's a comment somebody made when I was looking up things to avoid. Yeah. Also avoid open spaces because you'll be the tallest thing in the space and you could attract the lightning. Additionally, like I said earlier, keep out of shallow caves or overhangs. The lightning's current can easily jump across that gap between like the top of the cave and the bottom of the cave. And if you're in the mouth of that cave, you're in between it and the ground, the lightning and the ground. So be careful. Things you want to look for or seek are shelter. That's like your first thing. To be fully safe from lightning, you'll need pretty significant shelter that has some type of grounding mechanism, like plumbing or wiring, to transfer electricity from the shelter's roof into the ground. Without a grounding mechanism, your entire shelter could become electrified. Keep in mind not to touch plumbing, electrical equipment, metal objects, or water, as this could be electrically charged during a lightning storm. If you don't have a substantial structure, which is basically a house or a office building, which most people don't in the backcountry, next best thing is a hard-topped vehicle. What is not a good shelter is open structures such as trail shelters, patios, open garages, tents, dugouts, and sheds. This is because they don't have any grounding mechanism, or they aren't solid enough, right? Or they're kind of like that shallow cave scenario. Additionally, if you have no sheltering options, try seeking the tree line where there are a lot of trees, or if there's sparse vegetation, find a clump of shrubs or trees of uniform height and kind of like hunker down between them at a lower level. Preferably don't choose the biggest tree in the clump to sit next to because that'll be the one that's most likely to attract lightning. If there are no trees at all, seek a ditch, trench, or lower ground, and then be low. The best position in a lightning storm is basically like a low crouch position. Your feet should be together. See the image on the right? And your hands are best to be over your ears to protect yourself from acoustic shock from the sound. Some people recommend putting a foam pad or a pack underneath them. Um, I've read that that might not be super effective. The best position is that crouch, low, feet together, hands over your ears. Once the storm appears to have like retreated or gone a different direction, you still want to keep pretty aware for the next 30 minutes after the last observed lightning or thunder because it could switch directions or it could still be approaching you and it just had like a pause in it. Um Finally, since we're coming up on our 30 minutes, if you do get struck by lightning, even against your best wishes and you did every single thing on this list, you're probably going to need medical treatment. Or if your friend got struck, they're going to need medical treatment. About 80% of lightning strike victims do survive. Um, Thankfully, the victim will not retain electric charge after the strike. And so you can go immediately to help them as long as there's not more lightning coming your way. If you can, call 911 or seek emergency medical support immediately after the strike happens. If obviously you can't call or they're too far away to help your friend in time, you're going to want to wait for lightning strikes to pass and then evaluate your friend's condition immediately and begin medical treatment if you can. If a victim has a pulse but isn't breathing, you're going to want to administer mouth to mouth to restore the breathing. If the victim does not have pulse, which also means they're not going to be breathing, you want to begin hands-only CPR. Once the victims who are immediately in danger of dying have been taken care of, assist any other victims who have burns, broken bones, nervous system damage, or loss of hearing and eyesight, which are all unfortunately, potential things that could happen from a lightning strike. Electrical burns are treated the same way as like a normal burn from a fire or a hot stove. So you might want to take a first aid class before you go out and get struck by lightning. Yeah, that's kind of my presentation. I had some stuff on snowstorms, but we're at 9:30 or 8:30, excuse me, California time. Did anyone have any questions? No. Or maybe? I don't know. Feel free to type.
Have you gone backpacking?
Sorry?
Have you like gone backpacking before?
Yes, a number of times.
Yeah. I've heard that the excursion club like offers some like backpacking trips. Have you like gone with them before?
Not excursion club. I work with adventure programs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we do guided trips. Excursion club is like I've heard is a good way to like make friends, and
Mhm.
they're a little bit less like trained, but I think a lot of people have fun with them, and it's usually free or a lot or like cheaper to go with
Yeah,
them.
cool. Yeah, because I definitely want to try like backpacking or camping, sometime in the future. I've gone hiking, but it's not the same thing.
No, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Well, it's a good first step, though. I'd recommend checking out Excursion Club once things open up again. I'd also really recommend if you've got like $100, consider going on an adventure program's guided backpacking trip. Obviously, I work with them, so I'm a little biased, but
Yeah. No worries. That sounds really good though. I can't wait. Another quick little question. You mentioned first aid. Does the rec center or like the venture program provide any first aid classes?
yeah, we do. We have, I believe, two different kinds wilderness. Oh, actually, multiple kinds. Adventure program says wilderness first aid and wilderness first responder. And recreation department does like normal first aid. I don't know what the word is like, just like very basic and CPR training. And
Okay,
then someone might also do an EMT course. I'm not sure, but they might pair up with another company to do those.
sounds good. Um, quickly, I just want to say thank you so much for like having the presentation, even though like it was just me at the beginning.
Well,
I really
thank you so
appreciate
much
it. It was
for
really
coming.
good.
I'm so happy you made it. If you're interested, I have my final workshop next week, Tuesday, the 9th, on spring edible plants in Isla Vista. So,
Okay, I saw on the shoreline.
yeah.
Yeah, I'll probably be there. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much for coming. It's good to meet you.
Have a
I
good
hope
night.
you have fun backpacking eventually.
Eventually. All right, see ya.